But through all of these practices, right, and taking into account what Matt Dillahunty says is, where is this mechanism that really tells us what is supernatural, what is natural? Where is this mechanism that tells us about the supernatural, that can experience the supernatural? And the more that I practice these things, I'm realizing, like, we are that mechanism. What's going on, guys? So today I got a question for you, and it's also a question that I've been asking myself ever since being on this journey of finding truth and finding what is truth, but looking in places like science, looking in places like physics, and obviously this leads into metaphysics. But the questions I've been asking myself of, the metaphysical of God and the existence of God and the existence of heaven, and really just finding all of these, like for instance, the philosophical argument of teleology, the argument that there is an intelligence behind the universe, and it's clear as day because of the universe being so fine-tuned for life. And these are ways that these are ways that man says this is proof of existence of God, because God did this clearly by fine-tuning. And then atheists just look at that and they say, well, no, it's actually just science, because this is just how it is. Whether you believe in Darwinian evolution or something else, I don't know. That it's just, this is how, through natural selection, even cosmic natural selection with the multiverse theory, that this is just how our universe came into being. It's just science. We know this. But still, the theist argues, but there has to be a God because it's so fine-tuned for life. And so, obviously, that's just one example. But through these different findings of things along the way, even in regards to time and the physics of time, that you can see how and where theists get their arguments for the existence of God. And so my question is, and it's been something that I've been asking myself a lot lately because of this book that I've been reading by Robert Monroe, Journeys Out of the Body. And this is book 1. I bought all 3 books, and so I've been studying this and, astral projection, the astral realm and dimension. It's just weird to me how I've done so many, I've looked at these things of the multiverse and other dimensions, but yet, Robert Monroe says in this book, and I haven't read the other 2 books, so maybe that's changed. This is just the first book, but that science has not, there's been out-of-body experiences for quite some time throughout history, but yet science has just always regarded those things as just mysticism, and they're not really real. But through some of the things that I've been reading in this book, it's got me questioning things a little bit more. And even Robert Monroe says in this book, maybe the astral projection and the astral realm will be definitive evidence for God or the existence of God. But obviously atheists will argue that's not necessarily the case. So anyway, back to the question at hand is, if all of this, the multiverse, this kind of stuff does become scientific. So when the supernatural becomes just natural, where is the line there? When does the supernatural, as we've claimed, or theists have claimed, there is a supernatural because there's God, but as we advance in these sort of things or in science, that it's like, actually that's not supernatural, it's just natural. So when does the supernatural become just natural? And it seems through the progression of my personal research and the progression throughout history of searching these things out, that the supernatural just becomes natural. And I find this really interesting, and I find this being a question that we need to ask ourselves in regards to, we need a definitive definition of what exactly is supernatural and natural. But I find this question interesting because I kind of still do, but not as much. But I used to look into a lot of Greek and Hebrew languages while I was reading the Bible, and just really trying to dig into the words and their meaning and what the verse actually means versus just the English translation of it. But through looking at the language barriers of the Greek and Hebrew translated into English, there is one word in Hebrew that means nature or natural. There is no Hebrew distinction between the natural and the supernatural. To the Jews, it's all just natural. It's all God is natural. These supernatural events are just natural. And the funny thing is, through research, through reading things like, this book of Journeys Out of the Body, through looking at the multiverse and time and the physics of time, and even just the correlation of like how that all relates to things that are said in biblical context, it seems that it's just becoming natural. So the question is, who determines what is supernatural versus what is natural? If all of it's just natural, then none of it's supernatural. But if you're a theist and you believe in God, or you're a Christian and you believe in the supernatural, then it would be safe to say that then everything would be supernatural. It's kind of like, it reminds me of How I Met Your Mother. I don't know if we have any How I Met Your Mother fans, but when Barney tries to make every night legendary, and then oh my God, Mosby, Tim? Oh my God, what's his name? The main character of the show. It's been so long since I've seen it. I just thought of this. Oh my God, I know it's not Tim. It might be Tim. Oh, what's his name? Dang it, Mosby. Whatever his name is, that he says if every night is legendary, then none of it is legendary. And so, obviously that's a really weird pop culture example for what I mean and what I'm talking about, but it still relates. So this leads me to the final point of this video. Besides just the philosophical question of where's the difference, where's the divide between what is supernatural and what is natural? Because if you are a theist or an atheist, let's say you're an atheist, then it's all just natural. If we end up proving it, if out-of-body experiences are real, it's not just lucid dreams, and this dimension exists and we can travel, whatever, and we figure it out through science, then it's all just natural. But from a theist perspective, it's supernatural. And so okay, so that's the question. Where's the divide? Is there a divide between natural and supernatural, or is it all just the same thing? That's the question at hand. But my final point that I want to make is I watch a lot of The Atheistic Experience with Matt Dillahunty. Love Matt Dillahunty. He is super logical, has excellent things to say. And honestly, I love watching The Atheistic Experience, just seeing how he just roasts a lot of theists because through just logic and reason, and it just makes me cringe at a lot of the people that go on that show. I'm like, oh my God, this is so bad. But something that he often brings up is that when people bring up an argument for the supernatural, he always ends on a point of, I don't know, which is humble in saying that I don't know. But then he leads to, we still don't have a mechanism, as he puts it. We still don't have a mechanism that is able to tell us what is supernatural. Because, to him, what he says, and I agree with it to a point, of we still don't have any, what is supernatural? Just because there's the fine-tuning argument doesn't mean that it's supernatural, that our universe was created and fine-tuned. It just makes it natural. And so, what is the mechanism that we have that tells us whether something is supernatural or just natural? And the more I got to thinking about this, the more I didn't really know how to put this idea into words. It was just kind of always there, and I thought about this, but I'll communicate it through how Wim Hof puts it, with the Wim Hof breathing method that I personally do, and I love it. It's changed my life. What Wim Hof says is, you can only learn by experience, which just goes to show how learning is not necessarily living, but living is learning. And I think that directly correlates with these kind of things with what is the difference between natural and supernatural. And I honestly think, this is still a thought process in my head. I'm still doing some experimentation on this personally, and just with this thought process and how this relates. But I think the more that I study spirituality, and also through meditation practice, through lucid dreaming practice, through all of these things, I'm learning that you can only learn by experience. You can only do so much studying. There comes a point where you have to do something about it. There comes a point where you can't just say, yes, I believe in God because of, maybe I'm just putting this out there. Yes, I believe in God because of the fine-tuning argument. I mean, you got to test these theories. It can't just, you have to test it. You have to test yourself. You have to go into the unknown. And so that's what I've been doing. And I haven't put out any videos on it yet because I have yet to have any experience from it. So I'm not going to talk about something that I haven't had any experience from. I think that's like just 101 in practicing spirituality. But through all of these practices, right, and taking into account what Matt Dillahunty says is, where is this mechanism that really tells us what is supernatural, what is natural? Where is this mechanism that tells us about the supernatural, that can experience the supernatural? And the more that I practice these things, I'm realizing like we are that mechanism. Like spirituality is, I want to say science, right, is looking for a ceiling on the matter. Like, where does it end? We'll figure it all out, that kind of thing. But spirituality has a grounding point, but they rid themselves of a ceiling, right? And so because there's not really a ceiling, it means that you don't really, there's going to be a lot of things that are just subjective to you. Spirituality is a very subjective thing. I think that, the things like this and, just different study in physics and metaphysics tries to find a grounding, but atheists look at that grounding as, it's just science, the grounding of it. But I think that, if everything of the spirit is real, is reality, that it is grounded in science. And that leads back to the point of like, it is all just natural. And, ultimately the question still at hand is, does God exist? Where if he does, and all of this is true, all of this is right, then that means God is just natural. It becomes common sense. Obviously, we don't know that, and that's just a thought out in the dark. But, so spirituality is a very subjective experience. And just emphasis on the word experience. Spirituality is a very subjective experience. And let's say science is a very objective fact. And I think that the two can be and need to be married together. And I think that's when we'll start getting definitive answers of what is truth. But I really do honestly think, and I'm not sure if he addresses it in this book or not. I mean, I'm only like that far through, but I got that far through in a day, so I know I'll finish it like quick. That we are the ones, we are the mechanism that has to marry those two together. I don't think there's going to be any sort of computer generated scientific mechanism that is going to be able to measure these supernatural events. I don't foresee it happening. I could be completely wrong. But like Robert Monroe does in the book and in all these laboratories, he hooks his brain up, his conscious up to EMGs, and they look at, he spends the night in laboratories and they look at his sleep patterns and things like that. And it's like, no, I really do think that those two things, like I said, the subjectivity of spirituality and the objectivity of science, need to be put together, and that's when we'll figure out truth. But I think we are the ones that need to do that. I think we are the mechanism that determines those things. So that's it for today, and I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please like, subscribe, and share. Just some things that you can look forward to that are coming is, I started to dive deep on this series of truth that I'm doing. And I'm just like, I'm going to do a little bit of research. And then I start researching it, and I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be a series. And there's some really good philosophical stuff in there. So that series is coming. And I have also told you guys and promised you guys a series on free will versus determinism. So that, dang it, man, I got through a whole video again until the very end. So that is on its way, the free will versus determinism. And just so you know, I'm pro free will. And then I also got to thinking, because a lot of you have asked about me to do a tutorial on the Wim Hof breathing method. And I think I'm actually going to do a series after I finish those two on just like mastering the mind. Because there's a lot of things that I've noticed in like, just mindfulness, meditation, breathing exercises, dreaming, lucid dreaming practices and stuff, that I have been practicing all of these things, and I've learned quite a lot through practicing these things. And so I think I'm going to do a series on just mastering the mind, mastering the conscious, where I'm going to teach on all of those things. So if that's something you're into, if that excites you, like I said, like, subscribe, and share, and see you misfits in the next one.
Peace.